Why is it that we can be forgiven of our sin, but Lucifer and his angels cannot? I think this is a question that I've heard multiple times. I know that I've heard it multiple times. I've asked it myself, and I think a lot of people ask this question. Well, you have to understand, though, Lucifer was created in paradise. He had that one-on-one relationship, seeing the very face, the physical face of the Father, knowing exactly the fullness of the Father, and being in that presence. Now, when we worship, what do? We raise our hands. Our hands go up. Our face goes up. We look up to the throne of glory. When Noah built the ark, the window in the ark was in the top of the ark so that he didn't see the storm around him, but he had to look up to heaven. But when we look at ourselves, what do? We look down. So Lucifer's first sin was actually not rebellion. It was that he stopped looking up at the Father. He looked down at himself. It was his truth. It was his thoughts. Think about the garden. Adam and Eve, not knowing right from wrong, created that way. They had a decision. He said, of all the trees, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He said that they could eat from the tree of life, which means they could have chosen to be eternally perfect beings and still continue to live in this perfection with God. But instead, they chose the knowledge of good and evil. They chose the one thing. He gave them full access to the tree of life, but he told them, do not touch this one thing. And the one thing he told them not to do was the one thing that they did. So when he kicked them out of the garden and forbade them to eat from the tree of life, that means he saved them from an eternal curse of being fallen from grace and living in eternity. The tree of life would have given them eternal life, because that's what flows from the throne of God. We are promised that when we get to heaven. The fruit from the tree of life. We are promised that when we get to heaven. So because the Lord did not want us being eternally separated from him in a eternal fallen state, he ensured that our fallen state was temporary. He forbade us to eat from the tree of life, and then he climbed up and was put on a tree to give us eternal life again, so that we could have, once again, that choice of going back and saying, no, I want a righteous life. I want to be covered in righteousness. I want eternal perfection. Because we are born into a sin nature, we have to be raised to know the difference. Lucifer already knew this, because he was created in paradise with the full knowledge of who God is and what the consequences were. Here's the difference. Lucifer was an eternal being who knew the actual consequences. Adam and Eve, they understood don't do that, but they did not understand the eternal consequences. Lucifer knew the consequences, and he still chose to disobey. He still chose to look at himself instead of focus on the Lord. This is why he cannot be forgiven, because he was an eternal being who knew the consequences. The Lord saved us from being eternal beings. We had the choice of choosing eternal life in the garden, but instead we chose good and evil. We chose to go the opposite direction, but we were not yet eternal. So he cut us off from being that way, from being in an eternal fallen state, and gave us the chance later on through Christ to have an eternal glorified state. And he ensured that this would be a temporary state, a temporary fallen state, whereas Lucifer lives in an eternal fallen state. And that's why Lucifer doesn't like us, because we are the temporary fallen state, where he is the eternal fallen state. And that's why he can't be forgiven. But yet we can. So don't forget, no matter how bad it seems, God saved us from being in an eternal fallen state because he wanted us to be with him that much. Have a great day. God bless.